Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to Conversations with Love. I am your host, Daryl Love, and welcome to my podcast. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about. So I need you to call a friend and tell them to pull up, tune in, and let's get this conversation started. Hey, 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 welcome to Conversations with Love, and I am your host, Daryl Love, and today we've got some great things we're going to be talking about, and the main topic for today is marriage. That's right, marriage. And this may be something good for those of us who have been in a marriage relationship for quite some time. It may also be good for those who are in the season of going into a marriage. Maybe you're planning on getting married. But I have none other than someone that I've known for quite some time. As a matter of fact, in terms of a marriage relationship for 33 years, probably a little bit longer than that. We can add maybe 3 or 4 more years to that 33. And that's, including high school and college and all that. But anywho, that being said, none other than Mr. Daryl Love.
Well, thank you, dear, for having me on your podcast. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Yes, and now I will tell you all, any of you who participated or listened in at the last podcast with my son, Mr. DJ Love, this is going to be a quite different one. Langston and I were a little silly. My husband is
Sillier.
Yeah, we'll say he's sillier, right? Well, let's go ahead and get right into this conversation, dear. Okay. And interestingly enough, I knew that this was going to be one of the topics of discussions that I wanted to have, because ever so often when I meet someone and I tell them about you and just our relationship, the first thing or one of the things that they'll ask is, well, how long have you and your husband been married? And I'll say, 32, now it's going to be 33. And they'll go, wow, 33 years. And if you think about that, in today's world, for sure, there aren't that many folks that have survived up to 33.
That's true.
Even if you get to 10, that's what I told a young person just recently. That's like a blessing. And so it made me just think about the question, what holds a marriage together? Well, actually, I'm going to just say several questions, actually. But what holds a marriage together? What does marriage mean to an individual? Because marriage for some may mean a totally different thing than to others. But it just really does spark a lot of conversation in terms of how do you hold that marriage together. So I'll just kind of stop talking, because that's one thing that my husband and I have learned over 33 years is that, he'll say to me, sometimes you just got to stop talking and let other people talk. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let him say some things. So what do you have to say?
Well, I think you raised some really great questions when it comes to marriage. Why does a person pursue marriage? What does marriage really mean? And I was reminded of the conversations that we had with the Lees when we had first gotten married. I'm not sure if you were still in the room, but we were over their house having dinner. And I said something to Mr. Lee about marriage. And he said, "You're just getting started. Welcome to the institution." And I'm thinking, that's kind of odd. What do you mean by an institution? He said, "You'll understand it as you go through your years of marriage. Year 1 goes, year 2, we have this re-engagement of a conversation." And he said, "Do you understand what the institution is about?" I said, not really quite yet. So about, I guess, moving into year 5 and 7, I started to really understand what he meant by that. And we talk about the institution of marriage. And that is, if you think about it from an organization perspective, sometimes you have your highs, you have your lows, but you have to protect your institution. And that's about caring for it. That's about nurturing it. And I think in a marriage, sometimes people get married and they think it's going to be an autopilot type of situation. And it's quite the contrary. It's like you have to put in the effort. And to understand when you get married, especially when we got married earlier and younger, it was like we were still evolving as individuals. Mm-hmm. And two people are then coming together and still evolving. And you have to, kind of evolve more into each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree. And it's funny because if you think about when we first got married, those first couple of years, those were challenging years. And I think, that's just being honest.
Very much
because
so.
sometimes people think when you get married that it's just all this glitz and glamour and you're going to be so ever in love. And you do go through those times for sure. But I think at the beginning of a marriage, maybe not for all, but for maybe most, truthfully, you're just trying to figure each other out.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I remember,
uh-oh.
I remember
Hold
that.
up now. We are on the podcast.
That's okay. It's all
we
good.
We ain't spilling all the beans,
We ain't
y'all.
gonna spill all the beans, but we're gonna feel just a few. But I remember, remember we were living in our first apartment, and you were going out, and of course, finances is one of the issues I think a lot of couples have to get their arms around.
Uh-oh, here we go.
And you said, "Well, I'm just not used to somebody telling me how to spend my money." And I'm like, well, I'm just not used to having somebody that I've got to sit there and share bills with as well. So we create these bills, and all the money needs to kind of come in. We need to figure this thing out. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the area of compromise. You remember also that we had that one bathroom, and it was like, no, you need to put your stuff in a basket and put it underneath the cabinet, right?
Ooh,
and
I do remember
that was a major thing for us. It was like a small thing, but I'm like, who are you to tell me where I need to keep my stuff, right? So I think, those are the small things that you kind of, learn to kind of deal with, learn to kind of pivot. But you asked the question around, marriage and what is a marriage? And I think it's like how we defined it. And I think from the very beginning, we knew that if our marriage was going to be successful, it had to be centered in God, right? And we had to make sure that we kept God the center. So beyond that ceremony, when we took our vows, and I think I shared with you, the most important moment of our marriage ceremony was when we took those vows together. Mm-hmm. And from that particular point, we were able to kind of, it really established a good basis from which we could learn to deal with the highs and the lows.
Right. Yeah, and I think there was a time where I'll just say, you said to me, how did you say? I'm going to honor my vows.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, I got a good one.
I don't know about. Well, I mean, that's
because really some men and or women, may not say that. And you said that clearly, because I was upset about something. I can't remember what it was, but I was upset. And, honestly, ladies, it's just that this was early on. And I was like, well, we can make this thing easy, right? And then you just were like, no. And I think that's a real thing. And I just think I learned from you. And that's something that as a wife, I've always appreciated, because when you talk about the institution and then when you talk about the basis of our relationship, which was based on faith, right? You have represented that well for us. And I think when you are married, and I'll say this from a woman's perspective, you want a man who is godly and who is God-fearing. And that's what I have gotten from you.
Well, and I'll say the same thing. I think back when, we were like dating, of course, it goes back to briefly in high school. We had an opportunity to see each other again back in college, and our relationship started. And I'd always said to myself, I really wanted to make sure that the person that I married would be not only a good wife, but a good mother. And, we were like, at that time, because you were pursuing me.
Okay.
After
you always say I was pursuing you.
But
okay.
So here's the rest of the story. All right. So the story goes, initially when Ron and I started dating, we were like in high school. And so we dated maybe a couple of weeks, and then so she kind of like dropped me because I was like maybe too nice. So
Okay,
then she
go
comes
on.
right. Was that my, okay? And then she comes back to college, and we kind of re-engage. And so she's like, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in you." You know, of course, guys were like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna let you work for me a little bit." But I remember as you know, time went on, and one of my fraternity brothers at the time says, "Hey, are you gonna get serious with Rhonda Love? If not, you know, we got brothers right here that are ready to like to date her or something like that. Man, why don't you let that girl go?" and I was
That's
like,
the truth.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is
it is
true.
true. And I was like,
That's
no,
true.
I said, this is, you know, at that particular time frame, I think I looked at you and I said, I'm not really ready for marriage yet, but this is the type of woman that I would really want to marry. And I think the rest of it was really based upon God's timing with certain things. And so I always say to young brothers, you know, as you're thinking about who you're going to select as a mate, it is so important that, first of all, she loves God more than she loves you.
Yes.
And I think the same thing, you know, for sisters who are looking for guys, like, because here's the bottom line, you know, a lot of people look at Rhonda and myself, you know, look at us and they go like, oh, it's a perfect couple. There is no perfect couple.
Well,
Now,
everybody ain't said that though.
well, you know what I'm saying.
Even though I'll just say, I didn't mean to cut you off. Even though
Haters gonna hate. All right.
no. I'm just saying that, you know, you and I always have a joke, you know, in that some people will say that. Let's just say some people say, oh, you're the perfect. And then there's other people that, you know, they may feel totally different.
That's true.
And it's all cool.
It's all good.
It's all good, right?
It's all good.
And again, that's even keeping it real. And I want to even throw up a like a pause sign by just saying, I think that's the thing that I'm really loving about this podcast, and I really want it to be authentic when people come on, that we can have those real conversations and real talk, because you know there's so many things out there that are so false, and people give an illusion, you know, and it's not there. And that even goes into marriage, because sometimes people will give you this illusion or this thought that, oh, everything is great. Look at them. They're this and they're that. And behind closed doors, they ain't talking,
Exactly.
you know? And now we've all been upset with each other, with our spouses before. Oh, now we got to tell this. So going back, rewind. Remember when we were kind of young in our marriage, and we would have our disagreements or arguments, and let's say we were going to church
Sunday morning.
on a Sunday morning, and you know we would drive to church together,
Not
and,
saying a word to each other.
yeah, be mad for real. And so we would get out the car, and I would say, or sometimes you would say,
Showtime.
We would say showtime.
See you, dear. Okay,
Yeah,
have a good
okay,
day. I'll see you later.
bye.
Okay, bye-bye. And then after the sermon, we feel like so convicted and everything else, and we apologize and everything else. And so, therefore, I think it's interesting sometimes when people say they see an exterior of folks, but they really don't know sometimes what's happening on the inside. And I think, again, that goes back to what I was saying before. I think we were still maturing. We were still growing. I mean, and I think, you know, for 33 years, even within our marriage, we have seen the highs, we've seen the lows, we've gone through the valley moment situations. And, you know, and sometimes I think we go through those experiences for God to kind of strip us of ourselves. And the only thing we can do is fall on our knees and petition God in certain areas, in certain circumstances. And that has caused a lot of growth. And so, you know, maybe conversations in year one and year two, when you get a disagreement, you ain't speaking for 2 days. Now it's like, okay, get over it. It's an hour, 30 minutes, 15 minutes. You know, let's move on. You know, keeping those short accounts as people talk about.
Exactly. And I think this is the other thing when you hear people talk about marriage, especially those people who have been married for quite some time. You know, they will say that the longer you are married, the sweeter it gets. And I think that's really true. I think at the beginning, yes, you're that liking love, right? And then you kind of, and not to say that you weren't in love or you hadn't fallen in love with that person, but then you go through this other stage where you're like, okay, I'm liking you even a little bit more than the liking love. I'm loving you. And now as you get older, it's like, I am truly in love. And maybe some people are thinking that's backwards, but I just think as you continue to grow and understand and and learn that person. And I will even say learn yourself,
True.
right?
Yeah.
You start learning yourself. Then you just become the relationship, I'm sorry, just becomes better and better. Because now you and I, we have a good time. Not that we didn't have a good time with each other when we were early on, but I just think now in our older age, we have fun and we still get into some little spouts. You'll tell me when I need to slow down and spin it. And anyone who knows me out there in my close to my hometown, y'all know I love to shop. God knows I love to shop. But I always tell him I'm never gonna put us in a bankruptcy mode. I get good deals. I like
Everything's
good
a
deals.
sale.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. So, and that's another thing is understanding your spouse, knowing who they are and those things that make them happy. But I do want to ask you a question. So often you will hear from people when they get married, especially young people. I hear this more with young people, but then again, I have heard it with some people maybe who've gotten married older in their life, is this whole thing of, do you believe a marriage is 50-50?
Wow. I don't think that you can put percentages on a marriage, because I think as a marriage goes through its cycle, there may be times where a person may be in a different space where they may need 75% support. Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe they're in a really good space and they don't really need as much. And so the other spouse, because as I mentioned, earlier, we're all kind of going through our own evolution in terms of maturity and things that we're having to experience. And, I remember when we had first gotten married and you had made this statement to me, everything in your life has always gone well and you've really never had to deal with anything, major. And I said, well, don't say that. I said, because God didn't operate that way. And I remember it was shortly thereafter, my mom coming to find out that, she was sick with pancreatic cancer. Mm-hmm. And I had to kind of deal with her illness. And as we were kind of going through this, that was the first thing that broke me. Mm. I remember the time that we, I got the call that my mom had been rushed back to the hospital. And I went into the closet and I was packing my clothes so that I could fly back out to Memphis. And I remember I just broke down in that closet. I mean, I broke. Mm-hmm. Probably one of the hardest days of my life, because I'm thinking, man, I got to go home and face the death of my mom, right? Mm-hmm. And it was at that point, I really had to, of course, rely upon God, rely upon you. You've gone through situations with jobs, you've had your mom's death. And so I think, this 50-50, it's really about being there for your spouse, showing up how they need you and when they need you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Exactly. And I just don't, I always tell people, you don't even want to think that way. And I can't even add anything really more to what you said, because it's not 50-50. And I would encourage people that if you are going into a relationship thinking that, I could be wrong, but I think you're going to come out disappointed, because it's just not going to be that way. And sometimes you even go through seasons. Sometimes those seasons can be long, where, you have someone that's, you're given 100, or 75 for a year or two, just because maybe they're going through something. And so you've just got to be that backbone. And, the thing that I always try to tell young people too, and you said it earlier, and I know we've shared it with our boys, is that you want someone that's going to love Christ more than they love you. Because if they love Christ more than they love you, then they will love you. Yeah. And that love is going to be solid. Not to say that, you aren't going to go through things, right? Because we know even just being in our own faith that we can go through some things, them trials and tribulations for real. And those trials and tribulations become harder as you get older. And that's why if you have a spouse, if you're blessed to have a spouse or someone to whom you're married with, and you're able to go, to have there to go through those things, it's a blessing.
Sure.
Because you get those encouragements in times when you need them the most.
I think when we go to weddings, And sometimes we've been sitting by each other and people say in that part of the vows, for better or for worse. And when people hear that and they say, I do, to, their vows, I think sometimes people don't understand what the worst may be sometimes, right? And, and we can only speak from ourselves from a Christian perspective because that's how we've kind of, our lives and how we try to mimic in our marriage and try to raise our boys from this particular perspective. So that's been that centerpiece for us. But it can get rough, and it doesn't. Like I told somebody else for who are thinking about going into marriage, it's like, yeah, the first years it may be great, but as life starts to hit you, even of yourself, you can marry a woman, can marry a very strong man, and a man can marry a strong woman. But everybody has this point when they become very vulnerable, right? And so you've got to, sometimes it's when you're saying to yourself, I hit my own season. Where it was like for the first time in my life, I just wasn't okay in certain areas. It's just like I was struggling a little bit in areas. And it's like, from just transitioning from jobs and all this other kind of stuff. And so as you kind of go through a little bit of that, you're relying upon your spouse to kind of help and help you through that. And so, but, that help comes with them. And then it also comes within the faith that you have. Somebody says a faith, we always hear Pastor always says so often, a faith that can't be tested is a faith that can't be trusted. Right. And so a lot of it is just this life's journey. You find yourself on this life's journey and, you don't learn to stress as much about it. And especially as you hit these roadblocks in your life, if you got a spouse that's there with you, it just makes your journey so much easier. And like you said before, we know now, based upon experiences, trials are going to come. And at the end of the day, it's like, how do we continue to be there for each other and show up? And as we go through each particular season and moment, what we'll find is that we'll find more and more about each other, our faith, and our relationship.
Right, exactly. Very, very true. So, we're kind of getting close to our time to wrap up things. So, first of all, I'm going to thank you for, being here. Not quite towards the end, but just want to thank you also for being the great husband that you are.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're my warm-up.
Well,
you and Langston were the warm up because you know how I've been wanting to do this, right? And that's something I'll even say being in marriage, that support system of things that people want to do, and allowing them to do it and to be there for them, through that process. So were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think it is about sometimes being able to support someone's dreams. So going a little bit beyond just, you talk about what makes a healthy marriage, because, we've kind of gone through the cycles earlier on in our marriage. We've kind of gone through as we've dealt with sometimes sickness when it comes to parents, and we had kids, and we had our young boys, now young men that are now a part of again our lives and helping them to move to the next stage. And so it's been quite a journey. But I think that, to be honest with you, what has really helped a lot, and I said this to couples. I think about the Worthings, and I think about the Fishers. These are people that were in college when we were in college, and the Vauxes and other people as well, that they served as great role models. So we looked at individuals and spent time with them at their table, having dinner. And those are the things I think that help pour into our relationship. And still to this day, having an older couple, even from our age, that when we can go to and say, hey, we're struggling, or, help us in this particular area, this life is hitting us in this point, how do we continue to kind of navigate? And always having people that help you to say, hey, you're going to get through it. And that's the truth. I mean, no matter how dark it gets in certain areas, I think because of our faith, we know that no matter what, God's going to see us through.
Right.
And so we can always hold on to that, right?
Exactly. And it's funny, you were just making me think of the times where I would say to Miss Lee, okay, your son is over here, is getting on my nerves. You better call him. You better call him, you better help him, or Mr. Lee. And I would also give credit to to our parents,
Absolutely.
because
Yes.
they were the basis of, or the base of what we saw in a marriage, right?
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can even be the same for our boys, to be the base for them in terms of understanding what marriage is truly about.
I think you're right. I mean, our models, I think, were our parents in essence. Not saying that they always did everything the right way, but they showed love to not only each other, to other folks. And I think that the way that we live our lives are a reflection of that. And we would not be where we are today had it not been for them. So it is truly a village that helps. And my advice to couples, again, is to get connected. Get connected with individuals where you can, be a little bit transparent and share information about yourselves, what it is that you want in your marriage, what you're seeking, and just get some good godly type of advice. So it's like I said before, it's not an autopilot, but it is something that you have to be intentional about your marriage, investing in it. Brothers, we have to make sure that we're showing up as the best versions of ourselves, continuing to work in those areas, because, hey, I'm not perfect. No one is, except for our Savior, Jesus Christ. He was perfect. But we just have to sometimes we talk about getting better. My son, I think that you played the song, and maybe, I'm not sure if you guys did it on the last
we didn't
podcast.
get to, but don't worry, audience. I'm just going to say there will be these little bouts of me sharing his music. So, yeah.
But I remember that. Yeah, he wrote this song. It was called Better. And I think it kind of says to a lot of individuals, what is it, we all should strive in our relationships, and personally and individually, just to kind of get better.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, one thing that I want to kind of go ahead and close out with is this whole thing of the question of what do you love most about a person? And so I'll go first. And I think this is a question that, I would challenge the listeners to ask their spouses or fiancés, what do you love most about me? And I would say the thing that I love most about you is, one, that you are a godly man, you are a God-fearing man, and that you truly walk the walk. I mean, because, there would be times where I would say, oh, I'm going to stay at home. Pastor, I'm going to stay at home. And my husband would say, now, God's been too good to you. And he'd be very serious. But then he said, you know what? It's a hard thing. And he'd walk on out the door. And then that would just kind of resonate with me. And I was like, ah. But, that was a growing thing in itself. But I do appreciate that. And then the other thing that I would say is just always you giving me what I want. I mean, I don't know if that's a bad thing to say, but it's the truth. I mean, really, you work hard, and we both work hard, but you fuss with me on my spending, but for the most part, just things, some of the life things, fun things. I'll say some of the fun things you just allow me to have. And then the last and really most important thing beyond what I mentioned first is the fact that you are always telling me you're proud of me. You always are keeping me encouraged. So I really appreciate that. And so that's what I love most about you.
Gosh, well, I mean, I could probably go on with the whole laundry list of things. I guess what I love so much about you is that, first of all, you love me and you're there to support me as well. You are one, sometimes I think you're a little bit hard on yourself when it comes down to, sometimes your relationships with others, but, you are a good friend, and, strive to be a good friend. And we all do that, and that is just trying to reflect God's love. And I think as a mother, I mean, I've watched, you're always concerned about our boys, even as older they are now. He needs a shirt. We should buy this shirt for him. I'm like, they old enough to buy their own stuff, right? But that's the mother part of you that you care and you love. And, and I think like both of us, we both have a desire to kind of become closer to Christ. I mean, so when you say, being a godly man, and you say for yourself being a godly woman, I think we both realize we're still work in progress. And so I want people to understand that it's nothing nothing so special, so magical about us. I think, and I am so grateful to God every day. We wake up that we get a chance to do life on life with each other, and not understanding, not knowing what the future may hold, but we take each day as it comes and just try to make the best out of each day. And so, I think for all those different elements and dimensions that you kind of, you give and you pour and you share, I'm grateful and I'm appreciative of that. So, and I love you.
I love you too. Love you too. And celebrate 33 years.
Yes.
Come on.
That.
Yeah. Good dad.
All
Well, thank you once again to my podcast audience. And as before, I won't have to say this, but as you're getting used to me and me getting used to you, how about that? I'm going to always leave you with what I call a love note. And my love note for today is very simple as it relates to marriage. Just keep Christ as the center of your relationship, and all things will fall into place. Keep him first. And on that, we're out.